ghosts. But who was the girl at the window? She looked down at him. He continued looking at the window. Suddenly, the face of the girl disappeared. Jim could not see well because it was very foggy. He decided to go home quickly. He walked in the door and into the living room. He saw his grandfather in the corner of the room.
"Grandpa,"
he cried.
"I saw a ghost."
"What did you say?" asked his grandfather with a smile.
"I saw the face of a little girl at the window of the old mansion. No one lives there, but I saw a girl. She looked at me."
"Are you sure, Jim? It's a very foggy afternoon. Did you see her clearly? No one lives in the old Stewart mansion. It's about 100 years old. There's a strange story about it, but I don't think there are any ghosts."
"What story? Please tell me,"
said Jim. "Well, Mr. Stewart was a very rich, but very strange man. He was very interested in science and experiments. He had a lot of enemies. People thought his experiments were mysterious and sinister. His wife and daughter died in a mysterious accident. It was terrible. He left San Francisco and returned to New York."
"I saw a face, Grandpa. I did,"
said Jim. "But Jim, you don't believe in ghosts," said his grandfather.
"You're right. But I saw that girl's face,"
said Jim. "Maybe it was your imagination," said his grandfather kindly. Jim went to his room and turned on the radio. He listened to some songs and then started doing his homework. The next day, Jim went to work at the supermarket. It was a busy day. A strange man with long hair and a silver earring came in. His clothes were old. Customers were usually friendly, but this man was not. He had an angry expression, paid quickly, and left. There was something strange about him. When Jim went home that evening, he phoned Brian.
"Hi, how was your day?"
"Very busy," said Brian.
"Yes, mine too. Do you want to see that new science fiction movie on at the big screen movie theater? We can meet at 7 p.m. in front of the park,"
said Jim.
"Okay, I'll see you then,"
said Brian.
"At Washington Square. Don't be late."
Jim left the house and started walking to the park. He stopped in front of the gate of the old Stewart mansion again. There was no one at the window. He stayed there a few minutes. It was windy, and the big trees in the garden made strange noises. He looked at his watch. It was nearly 7 o'clock. He was late to meet Brian.
Number 5.
Leonardo da Vinci, the man who painted the Mona Lisa.
I had many careers during my life. I was a painter, an architect, an engineer, and a scientist. But I was also a dreamer, dreamed of the future. Some of the things I dreamed about only happened many years after my death. I was born on the 15th of April, 1452, in a village near the Italian town of Vinci. In those days, all the great cities of Italy were separate countries. Vinci belonged to the city of Florence. My father, Piero Perugino di Antonio da Vinci, was a lawyer in Florence. My mother, who was called Caterina, was a poor girl from the village. My father gave me a good education, and perhaps he wanted me to become a lawyer like him. However, my interest was in art. When I was 14, I became an apprentice of the artist Andrea del Verrocchio. I worked with him for 10 years while he taught me. He taught me the arts of painting and drawing, as well as metalwork and other arts. Soon I began to help my teacher with his paintings. I was a good student, and by the age of 20, I was a member of a group of people called the Guild of St. Luke. Some of the people in this group were artists, but others were doctors. The detailed drawings that artists made of parts of the human body, anatomical drawings, were important for doctors. So the two groups of people spent time together. I enjoyed making these scientific drawings, and I also made religious pictures. My patrons always wanted these, and I was good at drawing and painting people. I could easily draw things that were in front of me, like many other artists. But I could also draw things that didn't exist. Having this skill made me an inventor as well as an artist. All my life I used my imagination as well as my eyes and hands. I used them all to invent things as well as to make pictures. In 1481, the monks at Spoleto commissioned me to make a picture for them. I started work. It was called The Adoration of the Magi. I hadn't finished the job. I had to leave Florence suddenly. Why was this? I'd made a musical instrument from silver. It was a kind of harp which looked like a horse's head. A prince called Lorenzo de' Medici heard about this instrument. Lorenzo was the ruler of the city at that time. He decided to send me to Milan with the instrument. He wanted to give it to his emperor, Sforza. He wanted Florence to make peace with Milan, and he hoped that his president would help this to happen. I did what Lorenzo wanted me to do, and for the next 17 years I spent most of my time working in Milan. It was there, in 1483, that I made the first of my two paintings of the Virgin of the Rocks. 2 years later, I painted The Lady with an Ermine. These paintings later became very famous. I also designed a kind of parachute at that time. In 1487, I made a drawing which is also very famous. I was very interested in proportions at that time, and I was interested in the work of Vitruvius. This ancient Roman architect had written a lot about the subject. He thought that there were rules about proportions in nature, and he thought that there were similar rules for the proportions between the different parts of buildings. My drawing, which is now called the Vitruvian Man, shows the man's body. The arms and legs of the man are drawn in two different positions. The man is contained by both a circle and a square. I thought that the proportions between the parts of a human body were interesting. I thought that there might be proportions in art, architecture, and in the rest of nature. I wrote my thoughts about this subject next to my drawing. Those years in Milan were very busy for me, and I worked on the cathedral in the city as well as on paintings for rich patrons. I also made a ceramic model of a horse called the Grand Cavallo. My idea was to make a very large coffin of this model using the metal called bronze. It didn't happen. The bronze version was never made. Why? Unfortunately, the government in the city used the bronze to make large guns. They needed guns to defend Milan from its enemies. While I was in Milan, I heard from my mother. Her health was good. She came to live with me in 1493, and she died I couldn't fight. I left Milan and I went to live in Venice. I was too old to fight, but I could design buildings and machines for defense against enemies. The people of Venice soon asked me to design defenses for their beautiful city. So I became a military architect and engineer for a year. But after I finished with that work, I didn't want to stay in Venice. I decided to move back to my home city, Florence. I enjoyed being in Florence again. I lived in a monastery, so I was able to paint in the monk's workshop. I used it as my studio. And there were so many beautiful buildings in the city. I loved walking through the streets and looking at the details of the architecture. But I also enjoyed looking at the natural world. I looked especially at the birds. They sang happily and flew happily through the air. If they can fly, why can't I do that? I asked myself. Why can't men and women fly too? That question stayed in my mind, and I made some quick drawings, some sketches. I wanted to invent a flying machine. So I made sketches of flying machines that had moving wings. They were only sketches. But one day, I told myself, people will be able to fly. I dreamed of flying, but all around me people were talking about war. In 1502, Cesare Borgia, the city's new leader, asked me to work for him. I designed weapons for him and military buildings. In those days, I had to spend a lot of time traveling. There were long journeys on the roads. Those journeys were very tiring. Between my travels, I tried to paint, but it was difficult to finish many pictures. In 1506, I decided to return again to Milan. Milan was now a safe place for me, and I had a lot of work to do there. It included many different projects, from church paintings to military designs. I often had to interrupt my artistic work when I did other jobs. Sometimes these interruptions were very long. For example, in 1503, I started painting the Mona Lisa, my most famous portrait. I wasn't able to complete it until 1519. During this time, I was able to return to my medical studies. In 1510 and 1511, I cut up dead bodies and made detailed anatomical drawings of parts of them. I completed over 200